The truth about plastic surgery in Korea and how medical tourism has evolved. Yes, medical tourism, just the way someone might travel to a landmark or a specific Michelin star restaurant, or even to like a festival or ceremony to celebrate a culture. There is actually medical tourism happening in different parts of the world where people travel overseas just to go get medical procedures. You may have heard of this, especially when it comes to places like Turkey, but Korea is definitely one of the hubs you're probably aware of. And I've only been to Korea twice, but as a foreigner who has fallen in love with Korean beauty and who has now gotten 7 different skincare treatments in one day at a clinic in Korea, I wanted to share some of the history, some of the things that I've found out from talking to locals, from talking to friends, and yes, even kind of peeling back the curtain and finding out what's going on behind the scenes that makes medical tourism possible and so popular right now. If you do want to know about the personal plastic surgery treatments and procedures I've gotten done, I've actually filmed an entire video on what I have and have not had done, and this also of course comes with a disclaimer that we will be discussing topics when it comes to beauty and society, and if someone has an issue with body dysmorphic disorder and other things, you might want to be aware of that before proceeding with this video. And we are working with BetterHelp to sponsor a portion of this video to help make these trips as well as this information possible. Because even when I visited Korea, I had no idea how deep medical tourism was for both locals and foreigners, especially how the government used to promote medical tourism, whereas now it's actually discouraged to even talk about the plastic surgery clinics or places that someone goes and posts about on social media. It's literally not encouraged, which is crazy how some people are getting around this. Well, let's start at the beginning for me, when I walked into an amazing VS line clinic in Korea and I wanted to see what they would recommend for me. I had an amazing experience and it was actually way less expensive than what I would have gotten here in America. And if you have not seen that video, it's a short and I'm also working on a long form video, but you need to make sure that you're subscribed and hit all, otherwise you probably missed that. But the cost of what I got in Korea, from microneedling to Ulthera to literally a chemical peel versus what it would have cost in America, was astounding. Here's the crazy part. I, of course, wanted to share what I was doing behind the scenes, but I was being encouraged to put down my phone. I didn't understand what was going on, especially because this clinic catered to a lot of foreigners and they had English-speaking people there. Well, I found out that in Korea, a lot of people aren't allowed to say where they're getting treatments done if they are residents of Korea. For example, if they live in Korea, you're not supposed to talk about or even post where you get a specific procedure done. And when I started watching a bunch of content in Korea and having friends or other colleagues and influencers translate for me, I found out that people would literally film their procedures and their treatments and they would say, oh, I got off on this train station, or I went to the place that has this banner. And people literally got onto an app, it's called Naver, and they look up the location and the place to find out where this specific person went for this treatment or this mole removal or this augmentation, which is just crazy and fascinating to me because it's so different here in America. And even though that was my beginning of starting to ask questions and wonder about medical tourism in Korea and wonder what's going on, the history behind this actually goes back decades before. About 30 years ago in the 1990s. Now obviously beauty standards have been around for much longer and media and Korean culture has been around for thousands of years. But in the 1990s is when things really started to change when it came to medical tourism and its upcoming rise. In the 1990s and 2000s, Korea started investing in medical technology. This is not just like lasers that we use in clinic, but actually looking into technology across the entire spectrum of lifestyle. Everything from phones to different security systems for houses to innovations in medicine and yes, in skin health. The government specifically started doing campaigns talking about the surgeries that they had to offer and promoting those abroad, especially to neighboring Asian countries and to English-speaking countries like the US, the UK, and Australia. Now here's what's fascinating is that it wasn't just lasers and skincare, it was also things for spinal surgery, for pain management, and even for cardiovascular and heart conditions. And seeing as some of this new and cutting-edge technology was available, and because of the difference between the Korean won and other international currencies, there was a huge savings that foreigners could have. Now, on top of that, the Korean FDA is really strict, they're really hardworking, but they're also really fast. And a lot of this is due to proper funding. Because the Korean Food and Drug Administration has enough money coming in, they can pay their workers well, at least that's what it looks like for me from the outside, and they can pay to get things done fast, efficiently, and correctly, which means they have more sunscreen filters available cosmetically over the counter, and they also have more medical treatments and procedures that have been researched. For example, when I went to the VS Line Clinic, and again, because I'm not a foreigner, I think I'm allowed to say that, at least I hope I am, but when I went to the VS Line Clinic, I had heard about it from Nuri Lounge, which is kind of a K-beauty curator, that a bunch of other influencers and content creators and people who just love K-beauty, it's like an app that they use. Well, when I found this clinic through the app and I actually went in to speak to the doctors at the clinic said said that salmon PDRN is one of the top procedures that people are getting for their smile lines, for under eye bags. And that was so interesting because salmon PDRN, while yes, it is used in the skin, it actually started out being used for pain and spinal reasons, which is just fascinating to see how back in the 1990s and the 2000s, Korea was cutting edge for all body health and really starting to put funding in the right places to help make Korea accessible to both locals and foreigners who needed help with their medical conditions. And in 2009, the Korean government officially recognized medical tourism as a growth sector and specifically said, hey, we recognize that there's interest here and we want to do this correctly and diligently. And yeah, if people want to come spend their money here, let's let them. In 2009, there was specifically a medical tourism support center that was created by the government to support foreigners, and Korea started to allow foreign money, such as people from the US like you or me, to actually invest monetarily in the Korean healthcare sector. So just the way you hear about the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ and you can put money into stocks or in an ETF here in America, well, starting in 2009, Korea made it possible that foreigners could invest in their healthcare sector. And when foreigners start investing money into that, hoping to make a profit or a return, it allows the Korean government to take that money and put it into research, put it into employees, put it into infrastructure, and to create things that people want that then gets purchased and then makes money for those shareholders and everybody else involved. And it's really interesting to see the way the Korean government started to do that back in 2009. Just 2 years later, in 2011, they actually had a campaign. Yes, they actually had medical tourism visas. Sometimes when you're traveling internationally, you need to get certification to visit another country beyond a passport, and that's called a visa to enter. And it depends on what country you're from and where you're going, but you need a visa to travel freely, and you can only stay for a certain amount of time that's listed on that visa or do specific things such as work or leisure as permitted within that visa. Well, to boost medical tourism in 2011, Korea literally created a medical visa to help foreigners come into the country and yes, get their medical procedures done, including beauty procedures, which continued to go on the rise. By 2013, Korea was seeing a ton of different people coming, not just from the US, but also from Russia, from Japan, from China, from the Middle East, from all over the world. And specifically, people were really interested in dermatology and plastic surgery. And because Korea had put all of this money into research and there was so much dermatologic science that was now being proven and coming to market, especially since it was less expensive here and still done by professionals, a lot of the foreign international travelers loved this. But the Korean government didn't just stop there. Not only did they have these medical tourism visas, but they also gave tax incentives. Yes, literally like the way you might get money back if you overpay on your taxes, the Korean government was giving people tax incentives and quote unquote money back to people who would spend money on medical tourism. And this is where it starts to get interesting from my perspective, right? Because when is it helping people get access to medical care that they wouldn't otherwise have? Again, here in America, medical care is ridiculous and there's a reason that so many people can't afford it, and it's also because of the insurance system, which is just trash. But when is it actually making healthcare accessible versus making it a novelty? When it's like, oh, I want to save a little money on my taxes, I might as well get an endoscopic brow lift and some lip filler, right? In 2018, there was something called the Korea Medical Tourism Convention that was held. Literally like a convention for medical tourism. Now, I have been to KCON in Los Angeles, which was amazing. And again, I've also spoken about Are You Subscribed? And I've been to SeoulCon in Korea, which was absolutely amazing. One of the best experiences of my life. But seeing and learning so much about Korean music and food and culture at those conventions, I would have been fascinated to go to a medical tourism convention. And specifically, it's kind of shocking to me that this medical tourism convention in 2018 happened before SeoulCon even existed. The very first SeoulCon was in 2023, and again, I got to go, it was amazing, and it was celebrating the city of Seoul, and the food, and the fashion, and the music, and the beauty, and the people. But to think that that didn't even exist for years after this medical one, again, I'm just like, where was my medical tourism visa at that time? Now here's the problem. The Rona. As you know, the Rona shut everything down. And as it did, Korea actually went through some lockdowns as well, even though they were very different than America. But especially during this time, the entire world saw this huge transition into communication digitally. This means looking at yourself on Zoom, at a computer screen, looking at others through FaceTime. And when people start seeing themselves on camera, I mean, does anyone else start picking apart their skin and their insecurities and their imperfections? There have actually been medical studies done on this, but there was a huge influx in in insecurity, and therefore people going in for different plastic surgery or medical procedures based on this Zoom fatigue that happened during the pandemic, where people were literally seeing themselves on video calls all day. And whenever you're on a video call, do you notice that you like look at yourself instead of the other people? I make an active effort to like look at the camera, but almost everyone looks at themselves. And there is something psychological to be said about looking at yourself and being like, do I look okay? And it doesn't matter which app you were using. That was something that happened to the majority of people. And in America, we've seen a huge rise and uptick in plastic surgery. Again, it used to be something for the wealthy and the elite and the celebrities. And now, because it's more accessible, and especially because credit is very accessible to anyone at almost any dermatology or plastic surgery clinic, it feels like everybody nowadays, not just the celebrities and the rich and famous, but literally everyone, including your next door neighbor's dog's firefighter's mom, is going to get something done. But a lot of people really started to hyperfixate on their beauty and their routines. And this is kind of where I think the huge uptick started to happen in America as well. You know, there was this linear rise of plastic surgery and treatments happening in America, but we really saw it explode exponentially in the past 3 or so years with, again, Zoom fatigue, as well as TikTok and the use of social media apps that allow us to filter our faces. And this gets into a totally different conversation around pretty privilege and about plastic surgery and about, you know, seeing ourselves in filters versus real life and the alienized beauty look. But when we're specifically looking at Korean medical tourism, you can bet that when everything shut down, that medical tourism took a hit. And as people started to try to skirt the rules because they still wanted their lip filler, they still needed their Botox, they still wanted, you know, their mole removals or their surgeries, there started to be this upsurge of content online, which yes, also happened in America and in places that used apps like TikTok, but in Korea especially, influencers started posting about this. And even if you look on Google Trends, there's a huge jump at around this time. Well, this is when someone in Korea starts to get concerned. And I don't know if it's the government, I don't know if it's an advertising board, but somebody starts to sound the alarms. And as you'll notice, this is when people start to have to censor where they got specific treatments and procedures done. And when it comes to influencers talking about these treatments, they're no longer allowed to say exactly which clinic they went to and what they got, but they start to say, I exited at this station, XYZ. And as I was in Korea asking friends and colleagues about beauty trends, it seems like in the past year or two, there's specifically been a huge uptick in natural beauty, in people wanting this youthful look, but wanting it to look super natural and not like they've had anything done. For instance, there's something called egosal. I think it's called egosal. It means like these little fat pads under the eyes that are supposed to look youthful or young. Women in Korea are actually using makeup to enhance this area. I got a makeover by K-Beauty Jenny, and she actually taught me about egosal and how to do my makeup in a very K-beauty way, which was fascinating for me to learn. But when I was in Korea, there was this huge emphasis not just on skincare like I was expecting, but on supplements and on inner beauty and on literal spas like jjimjilbang, which have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. These jjimjilbangs are basically like saunas where people go for these really immersive experiences, but apparently there's been a resurgence of them. You see, jjimjilbangs were shut down because of COVID. A lot of them went out of business, which was really sad for a lot of the local people who used to go and the local businesses and for the culture. But those that are still open are now seeing a resurgence, especially because there are few of them open in total. But it's almost this pivot to health and wellness and natural beauty. Even though people are getting a ton of stuff done, they no longer want to show that they've had things done. They want it to look absolutely natural. Whereas in the past, there almost used to be this idea of getting things done to show that you spent the money on that, or that you were wealthy enough or rich enough or like a celebrity enough to do it. And speaking of celebrities, you'll notice that we've completely glossed over the K-pop music, the K-pop idols, which yes, have had a huge impact on Korean beauty standards. This actually gets into another conversation around Korean beauty standards and about pretty privilege, and even about the Korean music industry and how potentially these K-pop idols are almost Korea's version of Disney kids, where people are chosen and actually go to school for acting and singing. They're picked out, they're told what to wear, what to eat, what to do, and actually kind of like industry plants that end up being super successful, but also really struggling with trying to keep up with a certain image. Now, I am not an expert on that. I understand there's a lot of tragedy, there's a lot of concern, and there's a lot of things that are mistaken around that. Because I'm not the expert and I haven't asked the right questions, I don't feel comfortable speaking about that. But if anyone has details on that or even knows someone that I could speak to, I would absolutely love to learn more about it because it is interesting. And based on what I hear online versus in person, there's a lot of conflicting stories. But there's no denying that media is a huge part of beauty influence. And it specifically seems like media and advertisements fuel not just the overall uptick in treatments and procedures, but specifically what type of treatments or procedures are being done. Someone will look at, a K-pop star that's holding up a product and say, I want that specific product. Or they'll try to find out what exactly that person had done and specifically which doctor did it. This happens in America as well, but it's not as well known. For instance, there's someone in LA that is very, very well known for doing a very specific lip lift, and everyone goes to him for that. But in Korea, that is way more common. This doctor is known for double eyelid surgery. This doctor is known for moon face cheeks. This doctor is known for this specific thing. But when it comes to medical tourism in Korea, it seems like there was this pendulum where before it started, it really started to gain momentum and kind of be pushed as something that was encouraged and sought after. And then as people started to see that, wow, everyone's getting these treatments, everyone has access to them, we're having this Zoom fatigue and insecurities are running rampant, everyone's rushing out to get these things. Is it good that everyone and their sister and their cousin and their mom and their Santa Halloween costumes seamstress's best friend is going to get these treatments and procedures? It's almost swaying back to being a little bit more discouraged, to being taken on with a bit more caution and not just getting treatments for the sake of a tax credit, but based on what people actually need and what will help them with insecurities or something that makes them look and feel good on their own as opposed to in front of someone else. And I think that's why there's now these regulations around advertising and not being able to speak about specifically where you go for a certain treatment, because the government or the advertising agencies, at least from my perspective, it looks like they're trying to take responsibility and make sure that even if medical tourism is happening and it's strong, that it's not something that is harming the individuals. And again, as someone who lives in America, I just have to say that's so refreshing to see a government approach it that way, at least from an outsider's perspective. Because here in America, it just seems like insurance companies deny your claim for everything. If you have like a legit medical concern, you can't get help. Yet if you want a cosmetic procedure and you're willing to pay lots of money out of pocket, you can get massive lines of credit for just about everything. Again, I think I told you when I was first interviewing at some different medical clinics, specifically a plastic surgery clinic, I was basically doing an interview and I walked out of there feeling like I was being upsold on getting a nose job. I was basically told that my nose was not good enough and that I needed a nose job in order to work there. And I was like, wait a minute, did I just go for an interview? Or am I getting a treatment? What is happening? Anyways, if someone knows more about this or can put me in touch with the right people, I'd love to learn more. But I think that medical tourism in general is fascinating. And if we want to dive into some of the specific stories of K-pop idols in Korea, or even people who have gone to Turkey for veneers and hair transplants, or even people regardless of the country who have been botched by medical tourism, such as those silicone butt injections that happened in Florida, oh yeah! Oh, I am ready to talk about it. But I think it's also super important that we discuss the societal implications of all of this. Like, what does it mean to look and feel good in our own skin? Yes, if we want to do a specific treatment or procedure, whether it's an injectable or something like microneedling versus something that is really invasive, like an endoscopic brow lift or a facelift or ear pinning. When are we doing it for ourselves, for something that we like when we look back in the mirror and we feel good and confident about ourselves, versus when are we doing it for someone else? When are we doing it for society? And if we have an insecurity, is getting a treatment or a procedure really going to fix that? Or if we learn to accept and love ourselves for who we are, does it not matter what we look like if we have that inner confidence that kind of shines through, right? And these are conversations that, again, I've had with therapists for multiple years, and we are working with BetterHelp to sponsor a portion of this video. And my BetterHelp therapist has been a huge resource for me. For me, being able to text someone at any time of day is monumental. And BetterHelp has licensed therapists that are trained in all sorts of fields who, yes, can specifically help with something like an insecurity or body dysmorphic disorder. Or of course, if you need someone to talk about a relationship, family dynamics, school or career planning, I found that it's so helpful to have someone that I can talk to, that yes, I can cry to, that I can FaceTime call if I'd like to, or I could even text at 4 a.m. and get a response. And what's really cool about BetterHelp, which I wasn't able to find within the traditional American medical system, which is again, a story for another day. In the traditional American medical system, at least from my perspective, it's really hard to get matched with a therapist and then finally wait 6 months for that appointment. And then if you don't vibe with that person or something goes wrong, you need to wait another 6 months for help. And sometimes when you're struggling, that is really difficult. BetterHelp is something that if you don't like a therapist, you can literally switch, and within a day or two, you have a brand new therapist that you can talk to if something doesn't go right, or if you don't feel like this person is helping you in the way that you need. And for me, having that access and that ability, and literally what I pay for BetterHelp, I pay for it out of my own pocket. And what I pay for BetterHelp is so much less expensive than what I pay for regular therapy. And I still have a psychiatrist who prescribes medications, which is different, and a psychotherapist. And seeing what I've been able to get from BetterHelp, especially compared to what I pay and the time that I have to spend with the traditional medical system, it's been truly monumental for me. I think I've shared that I've had an extraordinarily rough year and time recently. It's been miserable, and I've needed a lot more help. And that's something that I sometimes feel ashamed to say, because I pride myself on being a very independent person, but I've struggled a lot. And I've noticed that when a lot of like negative things are happening in my life and I'm having a really hard time managing what's going on, my insecurities come out of the woodwork. Like, I start questioning my body, I start trying to dye my hair, like I start picking at my skin, like all of these other things and these habits that I thought that I was over. When I'm having a hard time, it's like all of these negative tendencies come out. And just having someone who can help me work on replacing behaviors like scratching at my skin and skin picking, and that texting conversation or that video call with that BetterHelp therapist can help me stop, put my hands down, stop the picking, and focus on better habits, better procedures, and actually hold me to them. It's like goal setting and having like an accountability partner that helps me get there. If you're interested in getting help, or if you feel like you need someone to speak to, first off, I'll leave the National Suicide Hotline below, just because that is something that I feel that everyone should know about. Even if you feel like you don't need it now, it might be helpful for you or for someone else later. But I'm also going to leave a link to BetterHelp and a discount that they're offering. Because again, it's because of them that we're able to create videos like these, that we're able to dive into the history and the details and ask the right questions, and to compensate those along the way who help make these videos possible. But again, if you're struggling with your body image or insecurities, it's so important to understand the root of that. Because just like medical tourism in Korea or in Turkey or in America or any other country, you could keep going for procedure after procedure after procedure. But are you actually happy doing that? And when is it enough? And when do the trends change? What we see in advertising or media or in a K-pop movie or drama, when does that start to change? And then when do we feel that we need to change our entire face and our entire bodies to fit in with the status quo? Look at Kardashian bodies. They used to be big and voluminous, and now everyone's on Ozempic and becoming twigs again. Like, do you see how these trends come and go? Just like skinny jeans versus wide flare leg jeans, bodies and plastic surgery seems to be becoming a trend. And as it becomes something that everyone can get access to, I think that that trend and that swing of the pendulum is going to become a lot more apparent. But at least that's my opinion, at least that's what I'm seeing, and this is what I saw when I actually went to Korea to experience medical tourism for myself, and how that experience went, and how I learned so much about the history behind it after I started to do a little bit of digging and ask some questions. And I'm sure you have questions as well. Please leave them in the comments, and I'm happy to answer them from my perspective. Or again, I have a lot of questions myself about beauty standards, about the K-pop industry, all these things. If you know someone who'd be willing to talk to me, please put me in touch with them, because I would love to dive into this further, but specifically talk to people who have been there or who know these things better than I do, because I'm still right now in my pre-contemplation discovery phase. Anyways, I hope that you found this interesting and learned a little bit about medical tourism. If you do want to see those videos about what I got done, are you subscribed? Did you hit all? All of the links are in the description, and I'll even pin a comment that has some other links and resources to not only mental health help, but also to some of the studies and statistics that were mentioned in this video if you want to look into them further. Overall, always remember to reapply your sunscreen, because skincare is literally healthcare. Make sure that you do stay hydrated, and most importantly, be beautiful both inside and out. I love you, and I can't wait to see you really in the comments of this video. Can't wait for that one. Love you guys. Bye.